So welcome everyone. Nice to see you. I see that some of you are having your dinner or your post-dinner tea right now. Very nice. So I'd like to begin this evening with a meditation based on the Koshas, the model of the Koshas. And so it is helpful if you become relatively still, but if you have this delicious tea that supports you for the meditation, of course. And if you haven't yet finished your evening meal, of course. The first layer of the koshas is called the Annamaya kosha, the body of food. So we respect if you need to have the food articles. So please take a comfortable upright seat. Rest your hands in your lap unless you are holding a tea mug or some other food. You're welcome to close your eyes. Just beginning with the most expansive awareness. Try to sense the space that surrounds you here in the present moment. And you can begin with this space that's really relatively proximal to you, 2 or 3 or 5 feet from where you're sitting, left and right and front to back, above and below. And as you feel into that space that surrounds you, feel into it without expectation, even without anticipation. And then invite your attention to go beyond the immediate space. Maybe you can include the room that you're sitting in, or the dimensions of your home. And then perhaps like the footprint of the room that you're sitting in. So the space that your dwelling is occupying. And then invite your attention to go a bit beyond that, to have a sense of the surrounding nearby neighborhood to your dwelling, to the place that you are sitting right now. And again, see if you can feel into that space, not with expectation or anticipation, but to feel into it. Sense there are other dwellings perhaps, and there's other people. Their lives have certain rhythms, activities. The natural world that you exist in, that they exist in. And then try to go into the space that will be twice as large as your immediate neighborhood. So your attention is going to stretch outwards from there. You may also go upwards from there. And let your attention move in such a way as it's slowly increasing in the reach of your awareness. The next neighborhood and the next neighborhood. A little higher up from the earth. Yet again, a little bit higher up. Down into the earth. And a little deeper down into the earth. And then in whatever way you're able to, let your attention kind of expand to be moving east and west and north and south. Consider those who live in the global south, those who live in the global north, off to the east, and what lies to the west. Like the whole circumference of our planet. And the space outwards from our planet. So that's a very expansive and incomprehensible dimension. And having traveled outwards to touch this incomprehensible dimension, but a sense the phrase that everyone and everything is your relation. Everyone and everything is your relation. And that means that you are a relation to everything and everyone. And keeping a sense of that expanse, that sort of enormity, let your attention now start to come slowly back in. You sense the continent that we live on, the sky currently above this part of the earth. You can sense the region of this continent that you live on. And the region that you would think of as your state, or then your neighborhood, the street that you live on. And the place that you are sitting right now. You come to notice the density of your physical body, which occupies a certain amount of space. This density being what we call the Annamaya Kosha. And this density is comprised of food. It becomes food, it's comprised of food. And just try to sense, here it is, the structure, the physical structure, the one that you're borrowing, you're inhabiting it for a certain amount of time. Notice the sensations of your physical body. the felt sense of where you're sitting, that which you're making contact with. And begin to profoundly soften your forehead and from your hairline down to your eyebrows and the space between your eyebrows. Relax the eyes themselves so the eyelids can just drape over your eyes, no sense of pressure. Consider for a moment how delicate the eyelids and the eyelashes, how intricate the eyes. And from the bridge of your nose, relax down over to your cheeks, left and right. And as much as you invite the eyes to be at ease, do the same for the nose. Allow that to come to the ears. So ease for the sinuses, the olfactory senses, the inner ear, middle ear, even for the outer ear. You may loosen the hinge of your jaw and let your tongue go slack at the bottom of your mouth. Seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, they can all come down in volume. And then allow the skin of the outer body to relax profoundly, particularly in the places where you normally hold tension. Invite there to be some ease. And in your physical body, there's a certain structure, certain functions, and yet the body cannot contain your totality. It is not the summation of who you are. It's also finite. It has its limitations. And let your attention go a little more deeply than the physical body and start to sense the innervation, respiration, your body temperature, your circulation. You could imagine the inside of the body like the earth, the circulation pathways like rivers, the innervation pathway, all this communication that happens in nature. The respiration, like the breezes through the trees right now. This entire amazing inner system of communication that lies within you. And this we call the pranamaya kosha, also links the annamaya kosha to the manomaya kosha. So going deeper yet again, the sense now where is seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, touching. And what is the quality of the sense mind when looking for the senses? And the feeling tone of your attention mind when practicing like this. The physical body is temporary, it's finite. This communication system within you, the pranamaya kosha, also finite, temporary. And all of our senses change in our life spectrum and they fade. Seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, touching. For a moment, imagine how your life would be if you didn't have the senses. How would you orient your attention, your motivation? How would you interpret arising stimulus? How would your life be if you didn't have the senses? And then going deeper yet again, the part of the mind that is able to think, that has this intellectual capacity. It's called in yoga the buddhi. Just trying to sense now that in you, which is giving attention for this meditation. How are you doing it? What is that force that pays attention, that brings concentration? And then staying inward, let your attention go deeper, another layer. We call this Vijnanamaya Kosha, this place of deep knowing or wisdom. That's not about your personal knowledge. It's a collective or shared wisdom. So try to sense that the stream of this wisdom and try to sense of it that it wants to borrow you to express itself. It wants to borrow your senses to discern the real from the unreal. This deeper wisdom wants to borrow your capacity for speech to express what is most deeply true. This wisdom wants to borrow your pranamaya and annamaya kosha, your physical body, for action, for service or contribution. Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. And then deeper yet than Vijnanamaya Kosha lies Anandamaya Kosha. This felt sense, the indwelling joy or grace. And this sort of ineffable, wordless but palpable joy is also borrowing you to express itself. Like it borrows the hummingbird and the iris, it borrows the giraffe, the monkey, the ladybug, the tulips. And it also borrows you. For the finite life that you have, it borrows you to express itself. And with appreciation for that, which is borrowing you, which lives beyond you, which infuses you and everyone and everything. And please bring your hands together at your heart. Now, for a moment, remind yourself you've been practicing with others. And there's also this human realm where we have connection and we have the full range of human emotions and capacities here. You may bow your head to your heart. Release your hands and please open your eyes. So I would like to hear from you your experience of this sort of meditation. What is stirring for you? What's alive?
Sarahjoy.
Yes, hi.
Hi. I felt love and compassion for everybody as the sphere expanded outward to the whole world, without exception.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is what we call yoga. We don't have to give it a name. My friend and teacher, Catherine Ingham, she said, "A rose by no name at all still smells as sweet."
Yeah.
So we don't have to name that thing, but sometimes I like to say that's the essence of yoga, what you are describing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody else, your experience or your felt sense of things now? You seem very still. Am I reading you okay? Okay. Yeah. So I was fortunate to go the land of Breitenbush Hot Springs. That's why I included that for our Dharma time tonight. I was fortunate to move to Breitenbush Hot Springs without knowing anything really about what it was. And then fortunate to be able to have a job there and to live there for 4 years. Since the pandemic, I haven't left home. I haven't left the distance from my house to the acupuncture place for my brain injury. or the place where I go for the light therapy on my head for my brain recovery. So my first trip away from home was to Breitenbush Hot Springs, to the other home. And I really wasn't sure how I would feel upon going back to the land, knowing that it had this terrible fire. But last night in our alumni Dharma, which is for our teachers in training or teachers who graduated from the teacher training, so, you know, in this realm, we were talking about Breitenbush Hot Springs a bit there too. I have a slideshow to show you, and I can't do a big production on the slideshow because I do have limitations with my brain and my computer time, my screen time. So what I thought I would do is screen share and show you the slideshow, and I'll press pause to say a few things about the images from time to time. And then I will ask for your experience of it or memories or questions that might come to mind at different parts of the slideshow too. So let me do the screen share thing, which means everybody that you're looking at is going to be much tinier. But what you'll see on the screen will be this movie, the slideshow. Are you ready? You feel ready? So in this image here, I'm walking across the bridge from the community side of the river. I'm basically walking on my commute from when I lived at Breitenbush. I worked in the kitchen. So we crossed the bridge to go to work. And what you're seeing right here is the hillside where the massage house used to stand. And on that stump, you are seeing a kuan yin that got placed there. So this is the kuan yin a little bit closer. I can't walk up the side of the hill to get this photograph, so I zoomed in with my phone camera, which is as close as I could get. She's standing facing to the east. It's the sunrise part of the day. And these are the stairs that most guests never climbed. You come across the bridge from the community side of the river, and you're going to walk up to the kitchen to cook the food. Or walking up to the kitchen, you find the massage house there. So the stairs are perfectly preserved. None of the railings are burned. The ground just to the left of the stairs is black ash. This propane tank is sitting there to give the gas to the kitchen at Breitenbush Hot Springs, and it was unharmed and would have been a much bigger event if it had caught fire. You see the tree past the propane tank. The tree is across the river. And surrounding that tree are trees with needles and leaves, and that tree has become just the skeletal structure of the tree. This is the lawn where the staff would have lunch, and sometimes the overflow lawn when the guests were having lunch, and it was completely unharmed. These are the tables as they were set when COVID-19 required dining to be 6 feet or more apart. This is the children's play structure, which was also completely unharmed by the fires. And just in front of the play structure are the trees that had to be felled on the property and the debris as a result of that. This is the play structure intact from the other side where the swings are sitting still right now. And the ground where the fire came close enough that this had to be excavated to get some of the debris out of there. And this is the wood that they're milling from the trees on the property. Now we're standing at the children's play structure where the wood is stacked, and you're looking across at the building called the kitchen. There's no sanctuary. There's no massage house. There's no map that tells you where the hiking trails are. You're looking clear across to where the community lives because there are so few trees left in that part of the property. And the two men that you're looking at standing there, one of them is Conrad Zevely, who has been involved with Breitenbush for 44 years. He's the master of the systems at Breitenbush Hot Springs. This is where the sanctuary once stood. The trees that surround where the sanctuary was, most of them are charred. And you're again looking across to another part of the community. You're looking over the river to the trees on the other side. They seem like shorter trees because you're up on a hill looking here. This is the inner path, and it's blocked off right now because though the actual path right there was not damaged and the sign still stands, beyond that, the forest is decimated up into the meadow. If you turn around from the inner path, what still stands behind you and in the distance is the forest shelter, which was completely unharmed. And the map that tells you where you are at Breitenbush and that this is native land, that still stands there too. This is the arrow that was pointing to the bathhouse. And there's no bathhouse. There's no structure standing there anymore where the men's and women's shower houses were. The little structure that held the fire hose and one fire extinguisher is still standing, and off in the distance would have been the bathhouses. The outdoor showers survived the fire. This is the ground near the outdoor showers and walking on the path towards what would be the cabin area. So that's a little log and the water fountain to the left. The log was a place people would sit sometimes just to rest, and the water fountain is the stone structure on the left with the orange flag sticking up behind it. And these are the cement pilings on which all the cabins once stood. They've been made into a cement piling sculpture. And those are the radiators, also made into a sculpture. And this is the cabin area. In the distance, the roof that you see is Buddha's Playhouse, but this is what remains of the cabin area for Breitenbush Hot Springs. This is the cabin area, looking down past the C row and the D row cabins to another building that survived. That particular building is a cob structure building that I helped to build during a workshop when I lived at Breitenbush. We were building it with our hands. It's a hay, mud, and cob building with a metal roof, and it also survived the fire. This is Buddha's Playhouse. We're walking over the debris to get there, so now you're about halfway there. This is Christine and Helmut who went with me to Breitenbush. We found this Buddha's Playhouse completely intact. It does smell like smoke. You can smell the fire that was there, but the building is intact. This is the entrance into the Buddha's Playhouse, which we made really just as a place for meditation and contemplation. This was also built from the same workshop. And this is the little Buddha that sat through the whole fire inside the Buddha's Playhouse, facing to the east. And beyond the tiny Buddha is the large shed that holds the vehicles and the work equipment for Breitenbush property. And then beyond that is the summer home region, which you can't see just yet how devastated it is. And then up on the ridge are the mountains that we normally wouldn't see them because the trees would be blocking our view. There used to be buildings back here called the fire station buildings. Wally World burned down to the ground. You wouldn't know what that is as a guest, but some of you have been residents at Breitenbush would know what that is. The smoking temple survived. This is where people who had to smoke a cigarette during their stay at Breitenbush, they would go to the smoking temple to sit there.
Wait a minute. Now I can hear you.
Just beyond the smoking temple, you'll see a little sign on the left says Devil's Hole, but we couldn't walk down this pathway because the ground is unsteady and it's very cluttered with the debris. This is the summer homes. All the summer homes, just like all the Breitenbush cabins, all the summer homes burned to the ground. That's a chimney that once stood as a summer home at Breitenbush. This is it's being watered and kept green and fertile right here. This is the grave for my friend Jamshed, who was a longtime resident at Breitenbush. And when he died, he was buried here because he always welcomed the guests back home to Breitenbush when they arrived on the property. So you're seeing this greenery here because the community is taking care of his grave site. Beyond this is the community of the summer homes, all of which burned to the ground. That's the office that you would normally pull up to in the parking lot, which also survived the fire. There are the carts waiting for us to come back and use them. This is the walkway from the parking lot into the meadow up behind the store. This was the drive-in camping area here. This is called the Strawberry Meadow. This used to be trees, and the staff had tents in this area of the property. So there was staff housing amongst the tents back here. These are what the rock-lined pools look like right now. The trees just above these pools succumbed to the fire. So you see that they've cut the trees here. They have to shore up the bank, and the tubs are currently empty up here. There was a building there on the left that's gone, and then they have a yellow tape. You can't walk out to the Far Meadow pool, and that's also empty right now. This is the pathway from the Far Meadow pool back towards the sauna. That is an apple tree in bloom and 2 cold tubs outside the sauna. This is the bench outside the office, the store. There's the source of the hot springs on the property, 180 degrees of hot spring water there. This is the front lawn, walking towards the lodge. This is another view of the sauna, and we're going to walk down the sauna path. There's the Olympic-sized swimming pool that's filled with hot springs water right now. Because Breitenbush is closed to the public, we could go swimming in the pool. It's filled up when there's no public guests on site. This is the debris leaving Breitenbush Hot Springs, going down. This is the gate in Detroit, Oregon, that blocks people from driving up Highway 46 towards Breitenbush. This is looking at the gas station that used to be your first stop on the way out of Breitenbush. It was on the right-hand side. This is the place where all the boats used to be and the people in Detroit. And this is Highway 22. Oh, this is kittens purring. Sorry about that. I just downloaded everything from my phone that I had to and put it into the video. And they must have been in there in the download. So how are you feeling? What are you feeling?
Sarahjoy, this is Karen.
Hi, Karen.
I think I have had tears since your closing comments. from the weekend. And then knowing that you were feel extremely touched, missing it, so happy that you could go and be there and that this was an excursion for you that I know fulfilled your heart in many ways and was also difficult. I think it's that although I've only been to Breitenbush 3 or 4 times, it just is a place that you want, that I call home. It just is home. And we've often talked about sense of when you leave a place like Breitenbush, the feeling that does, and it just doesn't when you go home. It feels, I feel inspired by the fact that the work is being done, the grave is being preserved, the wood is being milled. That's incredible. That's awesome. I was thinking about that. What they should mill that wood, and they are. And I don't know. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's very hopeful and renewing. I can't wait to go back. And my heart just is, it's a mixture of sadness, but also that sense of change and hope and growth and renewal and all of that comes with it. So thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Yeah. Somebody else, how are you feeling? I think a couple of you were unmuted before.
Hi, Sarahjoy.
Hi, Chris.
Wow. Yeah, God, it's devastating. To see so much, of course I've known, but I haven't seen so much and been, walk through. So thank you for sharing. And boy, so much energy and just joy and healing has been had there. By me, and I know so many others. It's just really, gosh, hard to see that.
Yeah.
It really was. I know this is kind of minor, but the irony of the county not approving that cob structure, like for permit, and that's the one that actually stood.
Yeah. The only structures that survived in the part where the fire took the cabins were the forest shelter, which is also cob and stone,
Mm-hmm.
and the Buddhist playhouse, and the one that we built together in a workshop when we were living there. And Christian was there still. He was sort of coordinating that build. And those structures survived. For those of you who don't know, Chris and I were teaching yoga at Breitenbush together as residents at Breitenbush Hot Springs. That's where we met. He's now in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
I do have a brain injury with some amnesia still floating around. So we lived and worked there together. And we both taught yoga in the sanctuary. And Chris was on the cabin crew. So you went to those cabins all the time, cleaning them up, getting them ready, making them the hospitality crew.
Yeah. Yep. Seeing all those radiators. Oh my goodness. It's like the guts of the cabins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. I can't believe it. I mean, I still can't believe it, even though, I know it. It's just, wow.
Yeah. want to leave some space for other people, also the sharing, because if you're feeling moved or having emotions, this is a good place to practice sharing that. This is only one example of the climate crisis, the climate collapse, which is how it's being referred to. And I've been saying in our climate awareness groups, like we have to be able to feel and come together and share. So this is one of those opportunities. If you're feeling something that wants to be expressed, I do welcome you to do that. Maren, thank you.
Hi, Sarahjoy and everyone. Thank you for sharing that. Place is very special to me. I've been visiting there for a long time. I worked there briefly. Many memories as I was coming into adulthood, and then taking my family there, after adulthood, and laying in the sanctuary with my young daughter and looking up through the skylight and watching what we called sky TV, just like watching the clouds go by. And I mean, just all of it. There's a pretty big hole inside of me where that just knowing that was a place that I could go a couple times a year and feel that sense of home that so many are describing, and that peace and that recharge of just remembering what it means to be human on Earth, like what it really means to be human on Earth, and knowing that that's kind of been very disrupted it's really painful for me, actually. And there's just kind of an emptiness, like where am I going to go now? I have the broader picture that, of course, the land will heal, but it's not going to be fast. It's not going to be. I don't know. I feel like there's a bit of a hole, for sure.
Yeah.
Here comes my comfort cat.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's so worth respecting that you feel that hole in you, and it's like grieving is an act of respect for that which we've lost. It doesn't mean that there isn't something to come. Something more will be born in this case, and I'll talk about that before we close tonight. But allowing the grief to come through is an act of respect for that which has been lost. There's a poet, one of those Rumi or Hafiz people, maybe it was Kabir, who said, "Your grief for what you've lost lifts a mirror to where you are so bravely working now." Your grief for what you've lost lifts a mirror for where you are so bravely working now. So grief is something we have to be able to face and metabolize and express and be with. It's just as a part of our life. It's essential. And it seems kind of sped up right now with COVID and the climate together, and the injustices on the planet that we have caused and that we perpetuate as a species. Seems like the need for grieving is increasing, and the events are coming sooner together. So we do need to practice knowing how to grieve, to give respect for what has been lost. Thank you, Maren. Somebody else would like to speak from what you feel for the slideshow and the experience of being here with us as a community? Yes. Thank you, Rachel.
I appreciate the opportunity to see something we wouldn't otherwise have access to. And I haven't been there that many times, but I always felt like that, like my home, like it was a home place. Or someday in the future I'll go there more. Someday in the future I'll make time for that. So yeah, I'm very sad, but also like the renewal and rebuild and all of the work that all the love that people are going to put into it, I'm sure it'll just blossom into something even more special, like with more love and more appreciation and hopefully in the future.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'll share, Sarahjoy.
Hi.
Hi. I think for me, oh my gosh. I mean, I definitely all last fall and this spring, I miss spending time there with you, Sarahjoy, in the many, many, many retreats we did there together. I'm so grateful for the time we got to be there. And so I feel that loss on many levels, the loss of the time together, the loss of, that experience. But I also feel a tremendous amount of gratitude for having had that experience. And I think I feel really so much for the trees and the land and, stretching really beyond Breitenbush.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just feel so much gratitude for having been there, but also for the plants that surround me and ground me.
Yeah.
But the loss of that community of the ancient forest is probably the greatest loss I feel.
Yeah. So I stayed on the community side of the river because there's no place to stay on the guest side of the river. So on the east side of the river, I stayed there with my friends Peter and Conrad. And I walked to the trailhead for the Gorge Trail. And you can walk down to the first small footbridge, which is right there. I mean, it's just past where our tents were when we were summer staff, Chris. I walked on that little footbridge, and then the rest of the forest is gone. It's ash. It's huge logs, so you cannot find a trail. I had to go up and over because some of the logs are so large that you have to climb over it like a boulder. In some cases, the logs had fallen, I went under them, but you had to kind of boulder through the forest there. I came back from that to the camp and my hands were black and my feet were black and my pants were black. People knew where I had been. But walking out there, Lynn, to the forest, there's so many needles on the ground. It's all needles and it's not stable ground. So you have to be careful where you step. When so much light comes through there now. Some of the trees stayed, but they don't have leaves right now or needles, but their structure is up there. And so much light comes through. These teeny tiny baby ferns that were like lime green color, like so bright, were coming up out of the ash and the needles. It was auspicious and spooky at the same time. It all looked so much the same that if I hadn't known how to follow the river to get back to the camp, I could have gotten lost out there. In every direction, it was just ash and trees that had come down. But I did follow the river to get back to the community. Yeah. Thank you, Lynn. Anybody else your feelings right now? Something that wants to be expressed, or you want to practice vocalizing something that maybe normally you feel a little bit more timid to express sadness or poignancy. Okay, so I want to talk about what I was able to meet with Peter and Conrad about, but I want to say also this. I arrived at Breitenbush and went immediately to the sauna. A lot of people have asked Breitenbush, they've called Breitenbush, they've emailed Breitenbush, did the sauna survive? The sauna completely survived. So yeah, I went right to the sauna, the hot, cold, and I was remembering what it was like to be there in my early 20s, you know, to discover Breitenbush and to be there. And though the bench has been rebuilt, it's the same location for this bench. And you go hot, cold, and then you lie on the bench looking up at the sky. And I can remember viscerally in my early 20s there, this sense of like, life was so huge. It was like beyond the beyond to come from the cold plunge and lie on this bench and look up at the sky. The sense of peace, and this also the sense of like how puny, how tiny we are. We're like a little speck on this enormous planet. This would just overtake me every time I went to the sauna and laid after the cold plunge on the bench, which I did frequently. It was my favorite place to go as a staff person. I would find my way there. For a time, I lived on the floodplain near the swimming pool. So I could go in the swimming pool in the winter and then lie down in the snow right there at the swimming pool. On this visit, I went in the swimming pool, then I went in the river, which is within walking distance. You go down the embankment to go in the really cold glacier-fed river. And then you lay on the stones, which are heated by the sun, and you look up at the sky. And again, you feel how puny, how finite, how minuscule we are relative to it all, right? The great cosmos. And in just a few hours of being there and the renewal, these germination seeds began to plant in my mind. My passion for Breitenbush and community and healing and the ecology. These different wheels were turning, and I said, oh, don't speak too soon. Just like we say on these retreats, when you have some silence or you feel some peace or quietude, we say, don't speak right away when you get home. You might dissipate it. So I didn't speak about it that night with Peter. The next day I went to the forest. I had the hot cold at the spiral tubs. I had the sauna. I had the swimming pool again, and the seeds were still turning over in germination phase. And then I got to meet with Peter. But this thing happened where I hadn't been there even 24 hours, and I felt like I need to cook. I must cook something. I must cook lots of things. I must cook. And the kitchen that I cooked in as a staff person is not available right now. But at Peter's house, I was just cooking up a storm. I was making I made this incredible Indian buffet of food from whatever I could find in his place. And the one thing he did not have that was so disappointing, and you shall all send him packages of this from your homes to Breitenbush Hot Springs, he did not have cumin seeds in his house. The major disappointment, right? No cumin seeds. He did have black mustard seeds, but no cumin seeds. But I was cooking, and then Peter came in. I was talking with him about some of my ideas. Conrad came in. We sat around the table. I'm cooking. I'm chopping the potatoes, the squash, the rice, the curry, the everything, the okra. I had gotten Christine and Helmut to bring okra up to Breitenbush. So then we sat for hours talking about the next iteration of Breitenbush Hot Springs. What is to come from this? What can be born from this? And there's nothing formalized right now, and I'm not permitted to talk so much about it as if I have any position on it. But there's cause for hope that what is to come, it can have a certain potency that Breitenbush has never held itself as a place that is a teacher, like the place is the teacher. It has hosted teachers, but it hasn't held itself as we have a teaching to offer. We have a space to steward. We have a land to take care of. We have a river to be good care providers for. We have a place to develop a community where people can come and they can learn. But we haven't had the sense that Breitenbush has a teaching position. And I was talking with Peter about how so much could be taught from Breitenbush's, both its history, but also its present moment potency. Like a number of people that I know in their 20s, early 20s, and I've spoken to some of you about this, my stepsons who are 22 and 25, and some other in this range of the 20 somethings, they are not feeling great about going to college, being in debt, and the climate is collapsing. And what job am I going to have? I mean, they're facing like depression and despair. And I was talking with Peter about all the trades that could be learned in the revival of Breitenbush Hot Springs, like caring for a river, caring for the forest. What is salvage forestry? What is soil regeneration? The systems that are going to have to be rebuilt there and reestablished. Food sustainability, the development of a community, a place of sanity and courage to talk about what humanity is facing. And so we were talking in this full spectrum way that there are opportunities for what has to happen at Breitenbush to be a teaching center where young people can come and learn the trades. They're going to need them. They're going to need those trades for what's to come. This is not an unusual fire now. There's already a fire in Arizona. Chris Canaris is here at my home, and he said there's already fires in Arizona for this season. So on that level, talking there and also extrapolating into when Breitenbush is rebuilding itself, with what materials and with what design, what are the structures? When people come to be guests there, what can we develop that's going to foster a sense of people have to cohabitate and co-participate? I said to Peter months ago when he came to my home, before making the retreat for you all last weekend, he came, we were talking, and I said to him, it won't matter if people go to Breitenbush and have their individual renewal and feel their individual like samadhi and then go back to society as it is. That won't matter. And I'm not going to help build Breitenbush if that's what we're doing, because that won't add up to what is needed right now. And as we were talking, and he was hearing my passion for climate advocacy and community awareness raising and this collaboration that has to happen between neighbors and neighborhoods and cities and and the global south and the global north, he said I see you're right there. One individual having some samadhi in the hot springs, it's a seed that gets planted in them. Where does it go? How does it germinate? What happens next for them? To have a beautiful feeling from Breitenbush, but what happens next? So right now, Peter is talking with me about how Dia Foundation and Breitenbush can collaborate on fundraising, which is also, he has had a perspective that Breitenbush wanted to demonstrate to society that a small community off the grid could sustain itself with an ethical business structure and an ethical cohabitating land stewarding agreement. And we did that. We were doing that. Breitenbush was not always in the red, wasn't always in the black, but at the time of the fire, Breitenbush was sustaining itself for 44 years. Years and years and years ago, there was a flood when I was living at Breitenbush. In fact, I think Chris was also there. I got stuck in Eugene and you were on property. And I couldn't get back home because the flood made the road collapse. That road was repaired by FEMA, by funds from the federal government. But outside of that, Breitenbush didn't ask for money from governments, and Breitenbush never set itself up as a nonprofit because the founders wanted it to be a place where we could demonstrate a community could be viable in the woods with these other systems. This could happen. And so for the last 10 months, Peter hasn't had a perspective that Breitenbush should ask for help with all this fundraising that Breitenbush needs. And I'm imploring him to see it as a chance for us to contribute, to be co-collaborators with what happens next for Breitenbush, and to recognize that it's a temporary season of needing more help because the fires overwhelmed the structure that could have been sustained. And then Breitenbush can once again demonstrate what it is to collaborate as a community, to have a place for us to go serve and to contribute, and contributing some of our resources too. to the extent that we can help fundraise for that. Thank you, Maren. So I have asked Peter to open up the book so you guys can see what he talked with me about, how much they lost, how much the insurance will and won't cover, their fire insurance, the land insurance, how much the government will or won't be able to give them, what's going to be required to come up to code. Now all the buildings have to be to code. And I think, Chris and I can tell you, the buildings were not up to ADA code. They weren't up to the code. Some of them weren't permitted. So as you heard him say with the cob structure, it never got approved by the county, but it's one of the structures that stood through the fire. So all the cabins have to be rebuilt according to code and so on. So I've asked him to consider, how do we open up the books and just show you guys what it is and what Breitenbush has done and what Breitenbush could do. Most of all, when he and I spoke a few months ago, and the reason to have the retreat last weekend is that we agreed that we need places to come together for sanity and clarity and courage, to know that we aren't alone in what we're facing. And to have people come who want to ask the difficult questions and have the conversations that are hard to have in daily life when it's so occupied and so busy. And then, as in the Bhagavad Gita, which I spoke about last weekend, Karen was referencing that, we come down from the mountain, we come out of the forest, and we speak to people. So actually, I feel very hopeful for what the next iteration of Breitenbush is going to be. And as Peter and I were talking about it, we were envisioning what we're doing now and people being a part of this now and the next decade, this generation, to contribute, to be a part of that. We're building something for the people who will go to Breitenbush in 25 years and 30 years, 40 years from now. We're building it so other people will have a place to call home when they need one. Like Maren said, when you go, it always felt like home to you. I'm not saying that you won't have the chance to go. I'm saying that as we're doing it, the vision isn't let's rebuild it so we can go. It's let's rebuild something that is a collaborating, courageous community that allows it to become viable and sustainable for the next generation and the one after that too. So the building materials that they're going to be using for the cabin design are going to be what's called mineral wood, which is completely fire resistant and doesn't rot and doesn't fall to pieces in the ancient forest. So what the building materials are actually developed in Corvallis, Oregon. Even though it's in Corvallis, it's like a national, they ship their materials all over. So right down to the building materials and the process for the cabins, everything is being thought about for generations to come. What needs to be designed, including on the land next door to Breitenbush Hot Springs, there's a second piece of property that we purchased many years ago. And I asked them, are you going to have a solar farm anywhere up here? Because now the floodplain is very exposed to the sun. It always has been. It's down by the swimming pool. So I said, well, what about a solar farm down here? Because the river, if the glaciers are melting, the river's not going to last forever. So solar energy. So they're actually they have all the wiring on the second property for a solar farm to be up that way, to develop a certain number of large wattage solar energy for Breitenbush. So it won't have to rely only on the river. When the river goes low, they'll have another source of power up there. So everything is being passionately and meticulously thought about. I want you to know that is underway there. And I feel really honored to be in conversation with Peter about this. I'm just a little, puny former worker at Breitenbush, just like what do you call, a bit spunky and willing. Peter was there 44 years ago when he was not yet 30 years old. He was a part of the founding circle of people who could raise a hammer and who were willing to live in the woods without heat or electricity to build the place out. Conrad was also there, so they're my elders. So what questions are you having now as I'm saying this? Yes, Hannah.
Do you know if they have like volunteers that will go up, like the people who are willing to live in the woods and help rebuild it? Are they open to that, or are they hiring like an outside company to build everything, or like?
Mhm. So right now, the property has expert contractors up there helping the community. Like there's a salvage forestation company that's up there. Like the land isn't that safe to walk about on. So the liability of having people go right now for volunteering, there's a risk involved in that. So they aren't open to that at this time. However, there will be job postings, and there's going to be summer job postings, and we can look at the Breitenbush website, I think, in a week or so, that there will be part-time seasonal positions available at Breitenbush Hot Springs. Because they're going to need people to help. They're going to have a soft opening back to the public. Chris, it's going to be summer solstice weekend. If people want to go camping at Breitenbush, because there'll be no cabins to be there. Summer solstice weekend for us as residents was a time when the limit of guests at Breitenbush Hot Springs used to be about 200, except on summer solstice, it was 400 people. And so summer solstice was a model of a time when 400 people would come. I worked in the kitchen. Everybody who was coming for summer solstice weekends back in the day had to bring some kind of food to contribute to the kitchen. And then we were cooking up the food in the kitchen. And everybody had to have a job of helping out with the food lines, which were all outdoors. We could not use the dining room. And we had cleaning sinks for all the utensils and the plates and cups outdoors because you couldn't manage the dishwasher with 400 people. And then there were workshops all over the property that people would just sign up to offer workshops in any space that was available. You could learn Reiki or juggling or fire swallowing or yoga, whatever you wanted to learn. And it was basically this enormous celebration party on the land of Breitenbush Hot Springs, summer solstice. After my first 2 years there, I didn't look forward to summer solstice as a staff person. And I figured out how to unschedule myself from the kitchen and actually go away, because my introvert self, I was totally overwhelmed by what was happening at Breitenbush. So I was there for 4 summers, and one summer solstice, I didn't stay on as a staff person. I probably went to the ocean. I went away to the others. I went the other direction. But so they're going to open for a soft opening on summer solstice, and that'll be posted to their website relatively soon too. And they want to first invite people who have been to Breitenbush before, and also alumni like Chris and I, because as Peter said, we are less likely to complain if things aren't perfectly in order by the time we get there. We are more likely to appreciate. I mean, those of you who have been to Breitenbush before, and those of us who are alumni. Yeah, so really what we're seeing and looking through the eyes of yoga, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, there is a portion of the narrative where Arjuna sees everything that is through his teacher's presence. He sees all that is being born and all that is dying. He sees all that is at war and all the devastation and all the possibility. He sees so much in his teacher's revealing of himself that he becomes overwhelmed and asks his teacher to stop. Stop showing me everything that you are. I can't handle it, he says. But this is the time for us to be looking at everything, that which is being born, also that which is dying, that which is dissolving. The changes that are underway for the climate are underway the momentum is there for the climate. I'm not giving any predictions. I don't know enough about it. And the people that I listen to don't give specific predictions. But we do need to have awareness that we're living in fragile times. And we, as people interested in the Dharma or yoga, we kind of have a duty to keep embodying it and stewarding it to flow outwards to people who don't know now that the Dharma or yoga exists as a place of sanity or courage. And I think, as I've told you guys, I practice my own practice in the morning, listening to some of the climate science, listening, because I want to feel in my body. I don't want to just listen to the climate thing like as a side note to when I'm making my breakfast. I want to listen and feel it in my body. So I, on purpose, seek out certain speakers, people with some expertise, but different perspectives, so I can feel what they're talking about while I'm practicing. It lets me be more sensitive to the news, the climate news. I don't use it during my entire practice, and I won't subject you guys to that when you come to class with me. But what I am saying is I want our bodies to be involved in the conversation, to really be in the body. Let's go to Pat. Hi.
So in my study of climate crisis and what's going on and what needs to happen going into the future is a building of communities where we live, where we learn to live on the land, with each other, in smaller groups, smaller and smaller groups, in intentional communities. I just, as we're talking about this tonight, well, I'm filled with the sadness, a lot of sadness about the forest, because the forest at Breitenbush was my teacher. And so as we're talking about going forward, I really I have this vision of Breitenbush creating a community that is an example of how to create community and live together, live from the land, live on the land, with the land, protecting the land, caring for the land, being held by the land and each other. And I hope there's a place for old people. I'll sign up.
Yes. Yeah, Breitenbush was a multi-age community, a full lifetime community before the fires. And Peter is 72. And he's planning on sticking around for a while.
So I first went there probably 40 years ago.
Maybe you'll recognize Peter. Have you met him in person?
I don't remember. I don't know. I didn't hang out with the staff. I just went as a guest. And, you know, as I told you, Ruth Dennison was my first teacher. And so that was how I went there.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming in and being willing to have this time to share. And I think we're going to need more times of like pause and reflect and be in touch with reality. I know that you're not the sorts of people who are speeding about on the planet going to the next great mall shop. Your lives are more tuned in. This slowing down can still be done. This respectful, reflective pause can still be done more often for all of us. It's kind of sobering to remember where we are and what our duties are. So with this in mind, can we have a quiet period together before we close? We can sit once more. You can find your place, your personal seat. And before you close your eyes, you're welcome to do so in a moment, but see if you can kind of scan through the Zoom room to see that there's other people here, whether you know them or not personally, that you are with others. Some don't have their videos. Sometimes the Wi-Fi is not strong enough or the signal's not powerful enough, but for those who can turn the video on, we sense that you're with us too. We see only your name, we also sense that you're here. And so take in who's also here, gazing little square to little square. Varied ages and life experiences and geographical locations also. And remind yourself as you're here then that there are other people who care and who want to act and contribute and collaborate. And then taking one hand to place on your heart, representing that this community is gathered here. You can place that. And taking the other hand to place on your heart. That's your hand on your heart for respecting that you have arrived here also tonight. So you place the community hand on your heart first, and then your hand on top of that one. To install the sense of community in your heart, and also to make your own commitment to protecting community, creating, protecting, sustaining community. Sahana Vavatu. May we together do the practices that help to protect and preserve and sustain community. Sahana Bhunaktu. May we nourish each other. Savidyam Karavai. May we be willing to work hard when it's required. Tejasvina Tamastu. May we work hard to overcome forgetfulness or ignorance, to come into courage and honesty. Ma Vidvesha Vai. May we not succumb to impatience or intolerance in ourselves. Now let's take both hands and place them together in Anjali Mudra. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. In the end, some of what matters most to us is that while we've been here on the planet in our lifetime, we've had a chance to really sense that we belong and that we have made a contribution while we were here. And it does matter to us how we'll be remembered. Thank you all for being here this evening, coming together as a community. Namaste. So I will share with you the links for supporting Breitenbush Hot Springs and the link for the retreat recordings from last weekend. So if you wanted to see what Evelyn and Karen were referring to about the discussions. You can see that way. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming in tonight. I'll also send you the slideshow. It won't have my narration, but you'll have the slideshow. Okay. Take care. Bye.